Hello, hello, hello. Welcome to the Hype Yourself May surgery. I'm going to be hosting these monthly events on the first Friday of the month at 1 o'clock to answer all of your PR questions. If you don't know me, I'm Lucy Werner. I'm the co-founder of Hype Yourself, which I run with Adrienne, who heads up the creative and brand side. And this is basically a platform to help people learn how to do DIY, PR, and branding for themselves. As a starting point, if you haven't got it already, definitely get a copy of my book, which is behind me, Hype Yourself, which is a no-nonsense DIY PR toolkit. And I also sell prompt cards on the website too, to help give you those quick prompts if you're struggling knowing where to start. But without further ado, a bunch of you have submitted some questions. So I'm just going to go ahead and start answering those. But for the people who are coming in live, if you have any questions, feel free to pop them in the chat box, in the comments, or in the Q&A function, and I will try and get to them. Once I've posted the videos, also feel free to submit a question underneath, and I can either answer in the comments or I can use it for content next month. Okay, here we go. So the first question is from Nikki, and it's, I'm going in cold with no connections in the UK market. And what I would say to that is not a problem at all. I would say 90% of the pitches that I've landed have been with journalists that I didn't know before I did the pitch. And actually, I would start with kind of looking at 5 places. So maybe if you've got a product, it might be people who do product roundups, or it might be a features writer. So a features writer typically writes about a trend, and they might be a consumer affairs or a business journalist, for example. But what I would do is sort of Google the type of articles that you think you would like to be seen in, and build a short list of those journalist names, and maybe pick your top 5 to start with, because any more than that, it can get a little bit overwhelming in terms of nourishing those relationships. And maybe you can switch it up every other month or each quarter. The way I kind of keep track of the media is through Twitter. It's the best platform for engaging with media and having a relationship with them. I get a lot of feedback from people who are like, I hate Twitter, I don't want to be on there. I think it's always good to have an account, even if you're dormant on there, and you direct people to your other social media platforms. And the other thing that's really good about Twitter is that Google loves it. So when people are Googling your name, the first sort of images that come up would typically be linked to Twitter. So it's worth having a bit of a consistent, even if it's an inconsistent, consistent profile on Twitter, so that people can see you on there. The second question was how to make that pitch slamming without having to write endlessly. So actually, I would say your pitches should always be quite succinct, and it's probably a lot of prep work up front. It's a bit like that, the decorating example that I give quite a lot. So before you slap on paint in your house, if you're doing a good painting job, you'll maybe sort of prep it all and scrub it, and you'll decide on the colours, and you do it. So it's the same with your press pitches. So the about you and about your business, or the press release, should always come underneath that email pitch, and that copy should never really change. So once you've got a banging press release or a banging bio about yourself or your business, that will always sit under the sign off. And the sandwich part, so that I'm pitching to be included in a product roundup, I'm pitching to write a guest post, I'm pitching to be in a podcast, that never really needs to be tweaked. It's that the meaty bit in the middle, you really want to be getting straight to the point. So I have a perfect eco-vegan friendly candle for Veganuary for your product gift guide, for example. Be really kind of direct. If you have a product, maybe I would include a low-res image within the body of the email, so that the journalist can see what it looks like. I would try and avoid attachments if possible, because you want to take all the work out of it. And remember that most journalists are getting hundreds and hundreds of emails a day. So you really want to be getting straight to the point. And don't worry that that's your only opportunity to get to them. Like, you can pitch again another time with a different angle. If it's possible, you can always follow up to offer them a product sample, or you could follow up with a different pitch angle. So don't worry about that. But I would avoid sort of following up with a, did you, just checking you got my email, just seeing if you got my press release, because if they have and they didn't respond and they're busy, then that's probably just going to annoy them. But if you're following up with maybe a different angle, a few weeks or a few months later, it's not as problematic. Where to start when you don't have a big following was the next question. I think on that one, I would say that PR is a good sort of billboard tool. It's not specifically a sales tool. It can help with sales, but I wouldn't put all your money and budget on PR if you're trying to grow your audience. If you're trying to grow your audience, I would definitely be starting with building a newsletter. The reason I would always encourage you to do a newsletter is because you can get the open rate really strong, and that's data you own. So for example, I've had a friend who's just been kicked off LinkedIn. He had a following of 90,000. That took him 7 years to build up, and now that's gone. So I would definitely look to either create a lead magnet. So maybe it's a free download or a free toolkit or a free challenge that encourages your audience to sign up, and you have that data. And just be offering, I mean, if you're a service-based business, I think it's sometimes easier to build your audience because you can offer them a sample bit of your service for free. If you're a product-based business, I would definitely say it's keeping your customer leads warm, so giving them a good thank you, encouraging them to leave a review, and keeping them warm with maybe new product updates or exclusive offers or partnership affiliate links with other brand partners that could be of benefit to them. And we just had a question come in that said, how often should you pitch to the same person with different products? So I would say you don't want to keep bombarding the journalists, and I guess it depends on how many products that you've got. But I would say normally I would try and go in with a fresh approach maybe once every 3 months. If it's really timely, like if it's coming up to Christmas or if it's coming up to summer holidays or Easter half term and it's a very time specific product, then I would maybe push a bit more. The other thing to remember is that a lot of the time sensitive pieces are written really far out. So it's kind of no good pitching for Christmas in December or I guess even now. So where are we now? We're in May now. So we're already definitely looking at summer things, summer holidays, travel. So I would already be sort of thinking 2 or 3 months ahead in terms of your pitching. The next question was, how do I find the right publications for my clients' products or brands? So I would say it's actually taking a step back and being like, who is the target customer for your client's product or brand? And always, always, always think about where can you put yourself that you don't belong? And what I mean by that is, if you are a children's product, for example, maybe it's not just going to parenting publications. Maybe it's thinking a bit out of the box and going, oh, do you know what? There's lots of summer and holiday pieces being written. Maybe it could be used in a summer travel guide as a tip, a game to keep children occupied whilst they're on a long flight or they're doing a big drive across the UK for a staycation. So always sort of think about the different uses of your product and the different audience that would consume it and where they are. I also would have a look at similar products in your category. So maybe if you are a homeware brand, you might have other brands that you aspire to be positioned alongside, and have a Google to see where they're being featured. Just a caveat, this is not a go after your competitors and target their clients and target their press coverage. But it's just, let's not recycle the wheel all the time. We know that certain journalists cover specific themes and specific topics. So if they've covered eco-friendly dishwashing tablets, for example, there's a good chance they're going to cover eco-friendly cleaning sprays. So it's sort of just doing I think Google really is your best friend when it comes to finding the right publication for your clients. And I also think it's making your clients be aware that it's not always about national print coverage. Online coverage lasts forever. You often get backlinks, so it's really good for your SEO. It's evergreen. And the readership of online is so prolific in comparison to print, where it might appear once. There's something very satisfying and old school about print. But if you're talking about reach and engagement, it might be that a more niche publication works really well for you. So if you do have a travel product, for example, having a look at travel bloggers, or maybe even people who talk about different parts of parenting but might have a travel theme for summer that you could weave into. The next question was, what would be your top social media tips for a new biz account starting up? So I actually saw the account that did this, and I thought they had a really good social media feed. So, and I'm not a social media expert, I am a PR expert, but I would say from the social media side of things, it's being consistent. And if you're a small business, it's picking one platform that you can throw all of your eggs into one basket with. So if you know your audience are all about Instagram, then go all in on Instagram. I would definitely have a profile on all other social media channels, because like I say, PR is like a billboard. So even if you're directing people to your other feeds and you're not really proactive on all accounts, that's fine. You can say that in the bio, but I think it's definitely worthwhile having all the different platforms set up. And also not necessarily doing what all of your peers are doing. Again, like think about where you can put yourself differently. Pinterest does really well for product and service-based businesses. And what else? What was the other one saying? Sorry, my WhatsApp just flicked up, so I got distracted. Social media tips. Yeah, and you know, I think a lot of service-based business owners now are really going after Instagram, whereas typically LinkedIn is probably where you're going to see maybe the bigger clients or people with bigger budgets who might be able to take you on for a corporate workshop, for example. So I definitely wouldn't ignore those platforms. I also really like the Dots, which is a creative entrepreneur platform. Upcycle Studio. How long after a product range launch would you start pitching to journalists? So I would pitch as soon as the range has launched, to say the new range has launched. If you've already launched and not done that, then don't panic. I would sort of maybe fluff your timelines a bit. So obviously if it's been out for years, then don't say this, but if it's only been a few weeks or a few months, I think you can definitely say I've launched a new collection. And I would always, rather than say, you know, talking about every single product, I would maybe pick 2 or 3 hero products. You see the same thing whenever you see major sort of high street brands, they'll have the kind of few hero products that they push. So maybe you already know what your bestseller is, or maybe you know what you would like to be your bestseller. So I kind of go all in on a few hero pieces rather than trying to get everything. Okay, next question. This one's really niche. The question is, getting a non-profit niche interest food and farming podcast off the ground. So I think let's just apply this to anybody that has a niche podcast. The best thing that you can do is obviously encourage your guests to share with their own audience. So almost putting together a bit of a media pack for every single guest that you have on, giving teaser content out to your own audience so they know that something's coming, so you build that anticipation, giving the guest and yourself the assets that you need. So maybe it's a little audio trailer. You can use an app like Wavve or Wave, I don't know how you pronounce it, Wavve, for example. You can mock up your own audio clips, carve up some of the best pieces of the podcast, so you're giving little snippets to encourage people to come on. And I think where possible, it's inviting guests on that already have the audience that you want to be reaching, because you're going to be cross-pollinating with their network when they share. So definitely encouraging your guests to share is quite key. I think as well, I mean, it's saying it's non-profit, but I think there's people who want to target that audience too. So maybe there's a supplier or a brand that wants to, or, you know, maybe there's even a coach for people in the food and farming industry. I don't know. But I would have a look at kind of key businesses in that area and seeing if they wanted to get involved for a sponsorship opportunity. But also, if you host your own podcast, it's also pitching yourself as the podcast host onto other podcasts. And it could be that even though your category is quite niche, it still fits for other vertical sectors. So again, with people who are interested in food and farming, there could be other angles. And I guess this is where it comes back to thinking of yourself as a magazine, which I tell people to do quite a lot. When you think of your personal branding, and your magazines. Your food and farming magazine, for example, might predominantly all be about food and farming. But then as you go through, what are the other bits? Like, do you have horoscopes? Do you have recipes? Do you have health and fitness? Do you have eco? What are the other themes? TV shows, other radio shows, other magazines, other influencers in that space, and be sharing broader content rather than just your podcast. You become a bit of a hub for anybody that's in that sort of food and farming world. It could be farming fashion, for example. Okay, the next question said, I don't know, I feel pretty overwhelmed with everything I need to do, and so I'm not doing anything at all. What do you recommend? So I would say, if you're feeling completely overwhelmed, then I'd write down all the things that you need to do, although some people don't do lists, not to tick them off, but just to get it out of your head. And then I would say, pick off doing a newsletter first. Again, for all of the reasons mentioned above, or before even, I think having a newsletter is the best way to own your own customer data and to keep your audience warm. And so to start that, you can literally just build a sign-up form into your website, or via Linktree on your Instagram, or on any social media platform, and start thinking about what you can create to build that audience. And then the next step would be to start to do regular newsletters. So I don't do weekly, it's too much for me. I do monthly, and that's enough for me to keep my audience warm. I have got plans to do more than a monthly newsletter, but for now that's enough. Next question on the screen is, I wanted to know how I should approach journalists who work on articles such as 5 best products or 10 best products. Should I be changing the pitch email a little bit? So I think it depends on what the best products or the 10 best product lists are. But if you've got 3 or 4 examples, so maybe you are saying, this is the best vanilla ice cream, for example, it might be that you're going top 10 desserts, top 10 treats, top 10 vegan puddings, top 10 dinners or desserts ready in less than 5 minutes, for example. And it might be that there's different journalists cover different themes. So broadly speaking, it might be that you go to Indie Best, and then you might go to Bustle, and the title of their columns are different. So that bit would be tweaked, but maybe the content themes stay the same. But yeah, so I would be tweaking it to match the publication and the sort of lists that they'd be writing. But broadly, for when you're pitching for listicles, the copy is going to be generally quite similar. It's just going to be the name of that column that's going to be different. This one's an interesting one. It's a little bit niche as well, so bear with me, callers. But translation is only talked about in language and translation publications, but other linguists aren't my audience. I want to speak to lifestyle brands, but there's no sportswear brand ever mentioning the benefits of having their website translated. So I think on this one, it's actually not traditional PR. It's more broader, sort of a broader B2B marketing strategy. So I would be educating brands on what are the benefits of having your website translated. Maybe it's highlighting some of the websites that are translated really well. So it could be a top 10, or maybe it could be a list on, maybe it's the brands that aren't doing well, just to be combative. And I would actually be kind of pitching more to the marketing titles. There's on Medium, there's a better marketing publication that you can actually submit a draft for. So if you don't know anything about Medium, I definitely have a look about Medium writing, but kind of look broader at sort of, like marketing and comms sites, and pitching yourself as an expert on translation and why translation is so important, particularly, in this global environment. So I hope that helps. Had another question come in. My virtual TEDx talk is going live in June, and the event organizers advised us to try and get some publicity, local or further. Where do you recommend as a starting point? So congratulations on your TEDx. I'm sure everybody on the chat is going to want to know how you secured that. So I would say, in terms of sort of local, I would have a look at what your local newspapers, local media platforms online are, and actually radio is really good. They quite often feature sort of hero business people, local community people who are up to good things. So I would sort of start with listening to your local radio show throughout the week, and just having an ear for the sort of talking slots that they have. And then in terms of the local paper, again, like you might want to invite them to come down to take a photo, or actually it's already happened, hasn't it? So maybe you might want to submit a photo to them of you doing it. And specifically, it would be good to know what your TEDx talk is live, but maybe there's a real powerful message in your story or what it is you're passing on. So you could potentially put yourself in interview around that topic. And in general as well, maybe with your broader network, you might want to invite them to come along. Maybe you could create a sort of VIP screening to stream it online. Maybe you could host a bit of a sort of a virtual party to celebrate the virtual launch. And you could carve up sort of elements. I mean, I know TEDx's are quite short. Maybe you could carve up elements of that talk and pass bits of that around. Think about whether you can use the opportunity to do podcasts or to write guest articles on thought leadership around the bits that you're talking about, and always have that call to action back to your TEDx talk afterwards. Because the main thing is a lot of people are doing TEDx's now, so you want to make sure yours is really standing out and getting as many views as possible. So maybe even doing a shout out on your social media channels ahead of that to say, is anybody interested in being part of my launch squad when it goes live? It would be sharing the link and kind of getting people to push it out into their networks for you. I hope that helps. Next question, suggested formats for email subject lines to entice journalists. So I would say on email subject lines for journalists, it needs to be really Ronseal. And what I mean by that is saying what it does on the can. So it's not a long pitch. Ideally, if it can be 10 words or less, that's good. And really kind of pitching exactly what it is. So I would typically say pitch, and then I would never say like Lucy Werner, for example, because most journalists are not going to know who I am. I'm more likely to say like PR expert to so a recent one I did was, it was a piece, it's not that recent, but it was a good example of a subject line getting through. It was a journo request looking for people who work from home and want to argue whether they like working at home or not. And I said, I love working from home and I have great imagery. So obviously it was in response to the journo request that she sent out. So she knew it was specifically for her, but it made her open the email, and then she was like, yes, you do have a great image. And actually it was the image that then led the main part of the story. So I would say if it's a journo request that you're responding to, and if you don't know about that, that's a hashtag on Twitter called #journo_request, and you see journalists calling out for stories. When I email, I'm literally responding to the subject line of what they have asked for. If it's a product, I would have the name of the column. So maybe if it's stylist, for example, it would be like pitch for the stylist, and say like a very kind of top line of what the product is. I wouldn't even worry about what the product name is, because again, unless you're Apple or Facebook, it's not going to be massively recognizable. If you're pitching a comment or opinion piece, then I would maybe have, writing expert argues that we should use AI, for example, something really combative that's going to get them to open it. So just some feedback on that TEDx answer I gave. So the event is having us all together to watch the event live with a Q&A afterwards, which will also be streamable. I got the talk by applying loads and getting rejected loads. See, it's all about, you keep on pitching. And that's another thing. I did a jokey post the other day about pitching's like doing handstands, because they don't always land. Sometimes they do land the first time, but a lot of the time you can keep on pitching to the same person, and it can just be the right story at the right time, and that's what lands. And I think the key thing is always the why now. Like, why is what I'm saying right now, and particularly the people who are maybe more service-based and who are experts, it might be that you're waiting for something to happen in the news agenda so that when you're pitching, you can be saying, you know, I wanted to write a story in response to. So definitely, I know lots of people don't like to watch the news, but maybe just have Google alerts set up for the type of stories or categories that you could respond to. For example, like I've talked in the past about shared parental leave. So I might have Google alerts up for shared parental leave. So if there's another big government announcement or a change about that, I can talk about my experience of it. Yeah. So that's it on the questions submitted. Does there anybody else on the chat want to submit a question? If not, I shall be signing off whilst I wait for anybody to hopefully type a question. Yeah, like I said right at the beginning, I'm going to be doing these once a month on the first Friday of the month. So either come on live and ask your question live, or feel free to DM me. I try and do a few Q&A boxes before, and yeah, submit your question. Amanda just asked suggestions of finding the right journeys in the sea. I'm not sure what you mean by that one. Maybe Amanda, if you could type that through again, just so I can get a clarification. And just broadly, if you do have how to find the right journalists. So for the right journalists, I talked a little bit about this right at the beginning, but I would say think about the type of articles that you want to be featured in and have a Google, and then create a short list of the people who are writing those contacts, so the sea of press. Yeah, there's loads. So I would say pick the ones that cover your product or your service or the type of piece that you want to write. Start with 5, start to follow them on Twitter and on LinkedIn, and yeah, just build it from that. Maverick Mother said, I'm sometimes stuck for what to pitch. I have so many ideas. That is definitely a good problem to have. What I would say is I would segment all of your ideas into different pillars, and maybe think, okay, right now I'm on a campaign to promote this part of my business, or I really want to talk about this stuff right now. So I'm going to give these this bucket of ideas a bit of a whirl, and kind of take it like a campaign each month. I do generally think it takes 2 to 3 months to build momentum. So if you're pitching and you don't hear anything back immediately, that is completely normal. But you can take the same idea, maybe pitch it a few times to a few different people, and then maybe move on to the next section. But also I would think about on the topics that you've got, maybe have a good old Google of what's been covered the most, because if it's already been written about loads and you've not got anything new to it, then it might not be picked up again. Natalie asked another question, what platform would you recommend for a newsletter? So full disclosure, I'm a MailChimp accredited partner, so I'm always going to recommend MailChimp. I like it because there's so many more functionalities to it other than just sending email. We can create our own bespoke template for it. There's the ability to have shop and website and landing page functions too. It can be a bit expensive, but for me, when I think about the number of subscribers I've got and the analytics I get on that person per year, it actually, for me, it's a very cost-effective method. And like we said, it's data that you own. On Maverick Motherhood, it's not ego out of the way. It's good to have it is really good to have so many ideas of topics. It's just refining it down. And again, when there's so much to do, it becomes really overwhelming. So get them all out of your head, and then just bank a few. Think, right, I'm just going to work on this sort of area right now. Okay, so it's coming up to 1:30. My biggest PR tip for any of you is try and listen to a podcast or a radio show or read a new online platform, subscribe to a brand or a network's newsletter, because there's so many PR opportunities outside of traditional press or publicity, which is getting in, newspapers and magazines. So everything you do in the public eye, whether it's doing an IG live, whether it's hosting an online panel event, whether it's writing a newsletter, these are all part of your PR wheel. It's all part of getting you out there and getting people connected with you and your business. So oh, look, Hustle Up podcast is like the Hustle Up podcast. Yeah, so have a go at something, even if it's not pitching to a journalist. Have a go at just one of the many, many, many different formats to promote yourself. And I will see you next month for the Hype Yourself PR clinic then. Thanks, everyone.